And Brandon or Tom, can you just confirm that you can see my screen?
100%.
All right, excellent. Thank you. All right, so let me get my presentation back up and we'll get started. And thanks everyone again for your patience. I have no idea why my monitor decided to go black on me right at the beginning of that. So couple of things. Thanks for joining. My name is Tom Szabo. I'm a staff solutions architect at VMware. I focus on our cloud management products. I am recording the call. After the call, we always send out a copy of the presentation and the recording for your reference. If you have any questions during the webinar, please drop them in the Q&A. If we can't get to you, we'll follow up after the webinar. Sometimes time goes by really quickly and I can't get to all of the questions. So I'm also joined by Tom Fryer, who was just talking, and Brandon Cura, so two of my counterparts on the sales side of my, we'll just call our pod, for lack of a better way to put it. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about service discovery. So it's a feature inside of vRealize operations that I find that can be extremely powerful, but not necessarily everyone knows. Oh, I just realized my video wasn't on either, so let me turn it on so people can see who I am. Hello. That can be really powerful, but a lot of my customers don't necessarily know what it is. So I figured what we would do today is do a quick introduction to what it is, and then really just jump in to one or two of my environments and spend more time, really just looking at how you actually set it up and configure it, and some of the things that you can do with it. The idea behind these Power Block sessions is really to not kill anybody with PowerPoint and spend more time inside of our labs, inside of our products, just to really give you a more of a hands-on feel to to show you what things look like. So again, if you have any questions, drop them in the Q&A, and thanks again for joining. And during this, I actually am going to turn off my video just so that my talking head is not present in the recording the entire time. All right, so it's a very busy slide. I just wanted to call this out. So service discovery in its current form was delivered in vRealize Operations 8.0. So the current version of VROPS that's available today is 8.6, or also as a service as vRealize Operations Cloud. This is a feature that is enabled in vRealize Operations Advanced and Greater. So it is definitely one of the more one of the features that folks that upgrade from standard or just start at vRealize Operations Advanced, it's a key piece of it. And what you'll see when we get into my demo environment is, besides just looking at some of the service discovery concepts, we're going to look at a custom dashboard I built that highlights some of the details around service discovery. And again, that is also a vRealize Operations Advanced feature. So anyone that's ever talked with me about vRealize Operations is probably familiar with what I'm about to put up on the screen. We have a really handy data sheet. It's up to 7 pages long, where we actually break down the different versions of vRealize Operations, how they're licensed, and the different features that are enabled at the different the different levels of vRealize Operations. And here's what we're talking about today: service discovery and application dependency mapping, which, as you can see, Advanced, Enterprise, and vRealize Operations Cloud. Right. So it has been around in one form or another for a while. Like I said, this is its current iteration. For any long-time vRealize Operations users, there was once something called vSphere Infrastructure Navigator, if I have my naming right, from an acronym perspective, which essentially was NetStat on steroids. All right, so what is service discovery? What are we actually doing with this? So what it is it's a way that we can use vRealize Operations to hook into virtual machines via VM tools. So it's completely agentless, so it's relatively lightweight, where we can discover services that are running on your virtual machine. So, one of the primary use cases of vRealize operations is really all about visibility, right? It's a monitoring platform. So step one of being able to monitor anything is to have visibility into your environment, understand what's going on. So with service discovery, you have an easy way to leverage VM tools and hook right into, we're already hooked into vSphere, use those VM tools to understand, hey, what's running on top of our virtual machines. Beyond that, once we discover certain services, we can also look to see what kind of relationships are associated with those services. So if we see different virtual machines talking to each other, we could potentially start to map out some dependencies from that perspective. We can also provide agentless actions into the virtual machine. So I'll show you some of this where you can run, you can get processes right from Windows or Linux. You can run commands, so bash commands, PowerShell commands, different scripts that you can run in the guest operating system right through vRealize operations. So, the biggest takeaway is that what it's going to do is help you discover services running in each VM and then start to build out relationships, or at least understand, the different types of services running on the VMs. And then beyond that, start to pull in some basic metrics that are based on those services that you want to monitor. And we'll definitely take a look at that as we jump into my lab. So today we support 41 known services. And beyond that, we also do have the ability to create a custom service. So if, for example, you have, some service, there's obviously significantly more services and applications out in the world than 41. So we do offer a mechanism that, hey, if you have a particular service running in your environment that we don't support out of the box, you can add it in as an option to discover. All right, so with that, that is the end of, well, I actually do have another slide, but we'll come back to different resources in a minute. Jump into my lab environment. So I actually have two different environments open, and that'll be clear why in a minute as we talk through this. One is one of my smaller personal labs, and one is a larger VMware lab that has significantly more going on inside of it. So give you some different views into how service discovery works. So first, what I figured we would do is show you how you actually configure it and set it up. So if we go under data sources and integrations, anyone that's ever set up vRealize operations, number one of the very first things that you do is you add a cloud account and you connect into your vCenter or vSphere server. So you can see in my environment here, I am connected to a vCenter. So if we edit this, just take a look at what it looks like. You can see I have my vCenter connection set up, and then over here to the right, we have another tab called Service Discovery. So this is actually how you turn it on. So if we come over here, you can see there's a little toggle switch. So by default, this is turned off. You can turn it on. So you have to turn it on is what I mean to say. So in this case, obviously it's turned on. And then from there, what we do is we provide, there's some options that you have to choose here. So one, the way it works is we use credentials to be able to hook into the virtual operating, into the virtual operating systems, into the VMs themselves. We can also do something called credentialless service discovery. And there's a link to a KB article right off of this page where, depending on the version of VM tools you're running, the version of vSphere, we can actually discover services without needing to put in, let's say, a service account to understand and interrogate those virtual machines and see what's running inside of them. So in this case, I have, basically service accounts, and not the best practice to use my domain admin, but that's what I'm using in my lab. And then I also have a Linux account set up to hook into my Linux virtual machines. So by checking enable application discovery, it's going to start to look to see, hey, is this service part of an application? What do we have going on inside of that, in this environment? Fairly straightforward to set up. Once you configure it, there will be another object underneath the virtual center itself here. You can see there's a service discovery option. So we can edit him or her to go and set some additional options. So there's some advanced settings down here where that's where, credential is service discovery. If it's available in your environment, you can enable it. I think by default it's disabled. I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's relatively easy. It's just a toggle to say, enabled or disabled. And if you have the right components in place, if it's enabled, it will start to discover the services that are available inside of your environment. One other thing to note, if the account that you're using to hook into your Linux machines is a non-root user, there is an option to enable sudo. So, obviously, anytime you're using a non-root user, that's something that you would want to do to be able to hook into that operating system and see additional details. All right, so we have this set up, and you can see if we go back here, just taking a look at the status, I'm connected to my virtual center successfully, and service discovery is working. So once you do that, you can come down under configuration here and look at application discovery. So you're going to see a couple of different options here. One, any known applications that are running inside of the environment. So Active Directory, you could see out of the box for supporting login site and vRealize operations. Then if I come here, service configuration, you can see where these are the out of the box services that are supported. And you can start to see where I've got some details already around, how many virtual machines are running these particular services in this environment. We click Manage Services. This is going to jump us to a screen where we can actually see, number one, all of the VMs inside of my environment. So I have a slew of different things going on here. And what this is presenting me, for example, is, all right, here's a VM, database VM, and you can see we've discovered that this is, well, you could probably guess what it is by the name, but you can see we discovered that Microsoft SQL is running. So we have a couple of options here. One, we could see the authentication status. So those common credentials that I had set up as part of service discovery config are working in this case. These are Active Directory joined Windows servers. So, and sorry about Windows 2008 here. Got to do something about him. So using my AD service account, I'm hooking in. I've got a couple of failures, and this is primarily, these are development machines where maybe I'm experimenting with, remote access, how I'm connecting in. So this doesn't surprise me in this environment that I have some failures. And we can also come along, and if we actually needed to force a particular password, we can provide an individual password for one-off types of virtual machines. So we can see, going back to my DB server here, services discovered. I have service monitoring enabled. So what this means, and this is another toggle, if I enable service monitoring, that's going to turn service discovery on and also make it check that service every 5 minutes. So it's actually going to gather some metrics on the service itself from the operating system, and every 5 minutes check the status of it. If you don't enable service monitoring, like for example, here's a development machine running IIS, every 24 hours, vRops is going out and just saying, hey, is this service still here? If service monitoring is enabled, it's going to check every 5 minutes. So I do see there are some questions coming in, and I will take a minute to respond to them. I see the last one, can we see why it's failed? In this particular case, you could dig into the logs. Like, I know for a fact that this is because I have no remote access into this VM because I was playing around with vRealize automation and automatically provisioning and doing some SSH configuration that I botched royally. It's the only way to really put that. So a couple other things here on the left-hand side, you can see the environment browser. So we have service discovery, and you can start to see the different service types inside of my environment that we're picking up. So I've got you know, an AD server, I've got some Apache web server, well, an Apache web server, few IIS servers, bunch of servers running SSH, you know, so different, you know, just a nice grouping of virtual machines that are running, you know, individual services. And then what we're going to do, you know, a little bit deeper in is show how we can take these different service types and create a dashboard that allows you to quickly see the individual VMs that are running particular applications or services inside of your environment. The other thing I just wanted to show, so I mentioned these are the out-of-the-box services. This is an example of a custom service. So it's really straightforward. You know, if you create one, you know, hey, is it a process that we're looking for? Is it, you know, we can use regex to identify specific, you know, processes inside of the OS. So in this case, I'm just looking for the SSH daemon running on port 22 and show it as SSH. It's a good way for me to see what I have, you know, what VMs are accessible via SSH in my environment. All right, so starting to see some details, VMs that are running the individual services. From there, we have, you know, and obviously one of the claims to fame of vRealize operations is visualization, right? Dashboards. Hey, it's great to have all this information, but we need to be able to see this at a glance, you know, be able to understand with the human eye what we have going on inside of an environment. So here you can see this is just a breakdown of all of the services that we're detecting and running in my particular lab. So again, bit of a smaller lab, but breaking down the individual components, and you can see, you know, just based on this pie chart, you know, hey, do we have, you know, a lot of IIS? Do we have a lot of Apache Tomcat? And one of the reasons why I have another environment open is just to show you a significantly larger environment where, you know, again, breaking down, you know, this is a larger VMware internal lab, being able to show you, you know, how many VMs are running SQL. Hey, we click on that pie chart and get a nice, easy rundown of the services that we have going on. And we can also see individual user-defined services here. You can see we created some services that weren't supported out of the box as well. So we have a good way to look at service distribution, see what's out there. You know, hey, if you, great example here, you know, as far as visibility, if you aren't expecting to find anyone running Microsoft SQL, for example, or any applications that you're not expecting, this is a good way to start to see, hey, what do we have going on? What are we running? And get visibility into your overall environment and just see, you know, do we have rogue services? What do we have going on? So we have a service distribution dashboard, some service relationships, so we can start to see the different services that are out here. And again, you're just starting to see some information around, you know, what port is it running on? Where's the actual install path? The process ID itself, you know, this is all from the operating, you know, the operating system itself. We have a breakdown of, you know, hey, what VMs do we have that we can't see services into? So that way you can track and understand, all right, hey, is it a password issue? Is it something else? You know, as you're trying to figure out, you know, if something isn't working properly. Like I said, my lab is a bit of an experimentation zone is the only way to really put it. So I do have some scenarios where either my authentication isn't working or I've neglected something and I need to get back to it just to take a look and see what's going on. And these are all examples of out-of-the-box dashboards. So here you can see, for example, you know, here's my database server again. You know, so some details around what it is, is service discovery running, have we successfully discovered services, some other details around, just some metadata around what it is, power state, do we have active connections? I don't have a lot going on in my environment at the moment, but you could start to see, click back here, some of the relationships and just seeing the hierarchy of the individual VM, where it lives. Here's that SQL database service that I discovered, the services that are running. And if I had any active connections to this particular SQL database, it would show up here as well. I currently do not in this environment. So from here, what I'm going to do is jump to the individual VM itself. And you can see, typical summary screen. Every object inside of vRealize operations is going to have a very similar, look and feel as far as the different options that are available to it. So number one, when you connect to a particular object, you can see on the left-hand side, different components that are related to it. For example, what data store is it running on? In this case, this is the service that it's running, my Microsoft SQL DB. If we come to the metrics tab, we can start to look again at what do we actually have going on here, relationships up the stack, what host is it running on, what cluster is it running into, and then we can see here, here's my discovered Microsoft SQL service. And now we can come in here and actually look at specific metrics that we're collecting through service discovery just because it's on and we're pulling it in from the operating system itself. So we can look at, CPU percentage. Right now, it's not doing much of anything. You want to look at, again, here's that process ID. If I connected to my SQL server right now and opened up Task Manager, we'd see, what the process ID is. Install path, where is it actually installed? The version, just to give you an idea of actually looking at the SQL version itself. So one of the things I was doing last night while I was preparing for the webinar, I was just taking a look in my environment and just taking a look at some of the different metrics and properties just to refresh my memory of some of the things that are available. And what I quickly realized was, wow, I am running an ancient version of SQL Server 2016. So I applied Service Pack 3, and you could see, historically the version number changing here, what it was yesterday and what it is today. So again, a good way to just be able to track and understand some of what's going on inside of the environment. Like I was saying, it's really all about visibility and understanding what you have going on. So just by turning on service discovery, we're picking up these services and we're starting to pull in and collect other metrics beyond just the virtual machine metrics themselves. From here, these metrics can be used to create, obviously just visualization, look and understand things and work with it manually. You can also create alerts, symptoms for those alerts based on different criteria of the metrics and properties that we're looking at. Again, somewhat of a vRops advanced or greater feature, being able to customize alerts, and that may very well be my next Power Block topic, digging into customizing your alerts and configuring them and fine-tuning alerts inside of your environment. So while we're here, another component of service discovery that it enables on virtual machines. So out of the, again, you have actions that you can take on individual VMs with vRealize operations advanced or greater. If I want to initiate a vMotion, power off this VM, resize the VM, any of these options that I choose, I set the criteria that I want, and it's going to make an API call out to my vCenter server and take action on what we're looking for. With service discovery, there are two additional actions that are added in. So one, we have get top processes. So if, let's say, I'm looking at this virtual machine and, hey, I'm seeing something that maybe CPU utilization is higher than I'm expecting, or I'm seeing some contention, or memory utilization. Hey, why is my let's take a look at my memory usage right now. All right, showing 81% memory usage, which isn't out of the question for a Microsoft SQL server, but maybe I want to see from the operating system itself. So I can say, I could do something like say, get top processes. Maybe I want top 20 processes from Windows here. Give this a second. And it should come back. And now you can see, anybody that's ever looked at Task Manager inside of Windows, this will be somewhat of a familiar view. Here's the, the processes that are running inside of Windows, CPU time, memory. There's my SQL Server process. There's that PID. I have no idea why it's running such a high process ID on Windows at the moment. But there's my SQL Server and what it's actually running. So that's one of the things that you can do. The other thing you can do is you can actually execute scripts. So we're doing this through VM tools. This does require putting in a username and password for obvious reasons, because you are running commands directly on the operating system itself. So for example, if we wanted to do something like, let's just stick with the processes. We can upload a file, upload a script and run it, or we could just run raw commands. So in this case, this is a Windows VM, so I could either run just regular command line types of, commands, or I can run a PowerShell command. So in this case, as long as I have my password right, we should get all process details returned to us in just a second. And you can see all of the processes currently running on my Windows box here. So you could do all kinds of interesting things here. One of the things I've been using it for recently is to, I've been rolling out SaltStack. So there's a couple of different ways to install a minion on your virtual machine. A minion is basically like a small agent that runs. So one of the things I've been doing is just uploading a small script that pulls down the minion and then installs it. So, PowerShell or just regular command line commands for Windows, and you can also run bash commands on Linux servers. All right, so we've taken a look at some of the basic functionality of service discovery and how it starts to allow you to see, okay, what's actually running on my virtual machines. But now beyond that, what else can we do, right? So there's a slew of different things. So one of the things that I really like about vRealize operations is being able to create custom groups that group your virtual machines, your workloads by specific criteria. It could be a vSphere tag, could be a virtual machine folder, it could be the name of a VM, it could be any number of different things. So in my environment, one of the things that I've done is I've taken those services that I've discovered. So I'm going to edit one of these, and I've created custom groups that now automatically group all of the discovered SQL servers in my environment, my Active Directory servers, my IIS servers, my Nginx servers, and I have other services. So we're actually going to create one in just a second. But just to give you an idea of what it looks like, I'm going to edit this. And you can see I've got a basic group here, SQL-servers, all servers detected by service discovery that, oh, that's a nice typo. Let's fix that are running SQL. Probably cloned it from my IIS group, which is why that was there. So now that I'm creating this group, by checking this box for anyone that hasn't created a custom group, now we're creating dynamic groups. So based on the criteria that we're looking for, every 20 minutes, if a new virtual machine is created, what it's going to do is automatically put that virtual machine into this group. So the other thing that you can do is now, one of the things that VRops is doing on the back end is there's a policy that's set that controls the types of metrics that are collected, the alerts that are firing, basically the intent that you have for that specific group of workloads, whether it's the entire environment or a subset. So if you have particular alerts that you only want to be available on your SQL servers, for example, you can have a custom policy that sets that for this subset of your virtual machines. So it's another way to control where your policy is being applied and how it's being applied. So from here, what we're doing is the criteria is basically, I'm just looking for any virtual machine that is a child of my Microsoft SQL service type. You can see if we preview, I only have one in this particular environment. There it is. So it's really as straightforward as that to start grouping your VMs by the application or the service that is running. So if we wanted to create one, for example, we can say add. We'll just say we're going to do SSH. And we're just looking for virtual machines. And in this case, we're just looking for a relationship. So like I was saying earlier, your membership criteria can be any number of things. And you can also add multiple sets of criteria as well to further thin down the selection and control what you're looking for. In this case, we're just looking for a relationship. Child of is, and I'm just going to type in SSH. And there's my service type, that custom service type that I created. Have my logic right. There are my virtual machines inside of my lab that are running SSH. Hit OK. And now I have an SSH group that's going to start to get created. So by doing this, we create, if we jump into my IIS servers, for example, now we have an object inside of vRealize operations that is that group, where we can look at, any alerts that are firing on this particular group. You can see I have to look and see, what do I have going on? I have a couple of VMs that have some alerts on it, which is why we're seeing health is degraded. We could come in and let's say, we wanted to look at views. So views are out of the box, the ways to consume different metrics and properties. So lists, summaries, trends. So let's just say we wanted to look at VM details. So here are all the servers in my environment running IIS and giving you a detail around, hey, what's their health? Are they powered on? Information, IP addresses, what version of Windows is it running? Different details. So from here, we can export that. We can just gather whatever information that we need, or we could jump in specifically to an individual VM to dig in and troubleshoot and do additional details from there. So grouping, if you haven't checked out grouping yet inside of vRealize operations, I highly recommend checking it out because it's a good way to just narrow down the subset of your virtual machines, really focus on a specific application, a specific function, a specific department, however you're logically dividing up your business versus just looking at everything from a very vSphere centric point of view. You can also use custom groups to tie into concepts like showback, chargeback, things like that. So we have service discovery running. We created a group for SSH, showed you that this IIS servers construct, the actual group itself. Now I want to show you a custom dashboard that I built. And this is actually something that I was building for another customer of mine as an example, but I think it's highly relevant to the conversation today. So this is a service dashboard that I created. So this is an example of a custom dashboard. So again, a vRealize operations advanced or greater feature where now, hey, there's a slew of out-of-the-box dashboards that provide all sorts of information and value. But sometimes you want to, again, focus the perspective on a specific subset of VMs. So in this case, I've got a widget picker here. just looking for those individual groups. So my AD servers, my IIS servers. And based on what I'm picking, you can see, and this is just some examples of how to visualize data, top 10 alerts active in the group. So, you know, in this case, this is definitely something I need to look at. You know, I've got a data store path down. Luckily, I have redundant paths inside of my environment, or I would probably have some down virtual machine. So that's definitely something I want to look at after this webinar. I'm also monitoring, you know, so one of the components of vRops is to look at different types of compliance. So I'm looking at the Center for Internet Security recommendations against my VMs. So I have some, I'm violating some of the hardening guides here. I might want to take a look at that. I've got a VM that's running out of disk space. I've got some websites that are stopped. That could potentially be a problem. These are calling out the default website, which is stopped on purpose in this particular environment. So again, just giving you some alerts on the overall grouping of VMs. Group metrics themselves, so based on what we're choosing, looking at individual, you know, hey, how many VMs are running SSH, what the average health is, you know, my VM compliance, again, looking at that, my CIS hardening guides, anything that's critically out of compliance. Fortunately, I'm not 100% compliant, but I don't have any critical issues here. And then what I'm doing from here is I'm taking this widget picker and I'm feeding into another picker where I can see the individual VMs that are running SSH. And then if I wanted to dig into those individual VMs, I can, you know, choose a VM and look at specific metrics. And again, these types of metrics are whatever is important in your environment. You know, these are just some examples looking at CPU contention, usage. MTD cost means month-to-date cost. We're at the very end of March, which is why this is relatively high for these VMs. Looking at VM tools, some VM hardware. And then again, this is just an example of a rolling chart of being able to look at different metrics over time. You know, and you can control your time data. Right now, we're looking at over the past 7 days, so you can see the individual thresholds. So this is relatively easy to set something like this up. I know sometimes jumping into customizing dashboards can feel daunting, but really there's examples out there. I could actually share this with you if anybody's interested in having a dashboard like this. Happy to export it and share it. It really didn't take me all that long to set it up. When it comes to creating custom dashboards in vRops, what it really just comes down to is understanding what you're actually trying to show. And spending a little bit of time with it and getting creative around, you know, hey, how do I want to present this data? Where does it make the most sense? And then from here, once you have a dashboard set up, you can do something like, you know, hey, I want to just share this dashboard with someone, maybe for a week, or maybe, hey, it's a group that they're always looking at their, you know, the IIS servers, for example. As long as they can get to this fully qualified domain name, they would be presented with this data. They don't need to log into vRealize operations. They don't need to know how to use vRealize operations. They're just looking at a dashboard that's presenting them with the data that they need. So I'm going to put up a quick poll. I forgot to launch in the beginning of the webinar. If anyone can answer, I'm just curious how many are using service discovery, how many aren't, how many have never heard of it. Appreciate the answers coming in. Like right now, we got about 20% are using it, 60% aren't, 20% or 18% have never heard of it. So hopefully you're getting some information today out of what you can do with service discovery. Put up my. So I'm going to go through the Q&A in just a second, try to answer anyone's questions. I also wanted to just throw up some resources here. Like I said, I will share this presentation with everyone that joined the webinar today. couple of good resources to check out. Number one, obviously our official documentation. We have really good details on this around how to set it up, any particular requirements that are necessary, whether it's, user account requirements, firewall requirements, VM tools requirements, things like that. There's our overall, oh, actually, I have to change this link. I didn't mean to link to what's new in vRealize Network Insight. But we have our cloud management blog, which just blogs.vmware.com/management. It's a great website to bookmark and check out frequently. We're always pushing, blogs out on at least a monthly basis, talking about new features, digging in, deeper into specific features, like, hey, what's new with Verni integration with vRealize operations? Wrong link, but good example. So I highly recommend keeping an eye on this. I'm sharing one of my counterparts, Brock Peterson. Anybody that's been running vRealize operations for a while has probably encountered his name and his blog. He's got a great write-up on service discovery, setting it up, how it works. Really kind of a good recap of what I just went through in the webinar, the knowledge-based article for credentialless service discovery, and then shameless plug for my YouTube recordings. Anytime I do one of these, I always upload it to YouTube and again, put it out there as reference, as if anybody wants to take a look and either just follow along in their own lab, in their own environment, and just use it as a reference. All right, so let me take a look at questions and see what we can answer. All right, so first question, is there overlap with VRNI and VROPS with service discovery, with service dependencies and mapping? So yes, there certainly is. So with VRNI, vRealize Network Insight, so I'm not just throwing out acronyms, it takes things quite a bit further when it comes to application discovery. So vRealize Network Insight is really looking at network flows inside of your environment. So where service discovery, you can almost think of it as, hey, going to an operating system and running a netstat, seeing your processes and seeing what ports they're listening on and what kind of connections you have. Where with vRealize Network Insight, you're actually looking at the traffic flows. So you're getting more detail when it comes to how much data is flowing between virtual machines. And part of what Verni does is it can actually create applications based on those network flows that it's seeing. So part of the integration between VRNI and VROPS is we can share those constructs. So, if an application is discovered and created inside of vRealize Network Insight, it can also be brought over to vRealize operations. So from there, then you can you can either share alerts across the two platforms, or maybe you want to just use service discovery to just do some basic up-down monitoring on that specific service that's running inside of the VM. So there's definitely overlap, but they are, it's kind of a different approach to the way things work, if that makes sense. Let's see, how does this service discovery differ for Windows Server versus Windows Desktop Horizon? What services can be discovered specific for VDIs? So I would say here, this service discovery is more for the server side, if you will, because at least in most VDI environments that I've seen, or just dealing with desktops, they're not really presenting services out to the network, right? Like there's certainly processes running inside of the virtual machine, but for that VDI use case, I would look more towards the management pack for Horizon to start to see what's going on inside of the VDI. This is really more, I would say, server side functionality, if you will. Hopefully that makes sense. I see another question about working with the Horizon agent and blast service. I would say same thing, looking towards more the management pack for Horizon to see what kind of metrics and properties you can get around the Horizon agent and the blast service that's running there. Another one, do firewalls need to be opened from the collectors to the virtual machine to collect the data? So trying to think about that. No, because we're really using VM tools. There are definitely some prerequisites that need to be met, and I would take a look at the documentation just to make sure you understand how it's working from there. But really, we're hooking in through vCenter and leveraging VM tools to get that type of data. So it's not necessarily a firewall running on the operating system itself, or in between the operating system and a collector, shouldn't really be impacting that, but definitely something you want to just check out in the inside of the documentation itself. So my dashboard is not currently on the Solutions Exchange. That's a good question. I should put it out there. That's definitely something that I can look into doing. And like I said, if anybody is interested in getting a copy of it, you're welcome to shoot me an email. You know, like I said, I'll send a follow-up email out. Happy to export it and send it over. Not a problem at all. Let's see. Why is there limited metrics in service discovery, whereas in application monitoring there are more metrics? So, and what's the difference between service discovery and application monitoring? So that's a really good question. So part of this, and let me drop out of my slideshow here for a second, try to answer this quickly before we run out of time. Go back to my DBVM, I'll pick on him. So here's that service that's discovered by, by service discovery. So like I was saying, in a sense, you can almost think of it as a net stat on steroids, for lack of a better way to put it, where we're hooking in and we're getting some details. Beyond that, with vRealize operations at the enterprise level, we do have application monitoring, and there's a couple of different ways that we can do application monitoring. One is installing a telegraph agent inside of the operating system itself. The other is using True Visibility Suite and doing out-of-band connections to a specific application. So for example, here, this is my database server. This is a VM object. I'm running TVS, so True Visibility Suite, formerly Blue Medora. And then I can start to hook in and actually see, in this case, what we're looking at is the individual databases themselves running on this database server. And then there's significantly more metrics. And it really just comes down to different functionality and different capabilities. There's definitely a difference there, a little bit of overlap maybe, but really the service discovery is just meant to show, hey, what's running out there, and give you some details to start working with it, where application monitoring is more, hey, I really want to get in and start to to aggregate my application metrics with my infrastructure monitoring. So it's not necessarily an APM tool, but it's tying the infrastructure with the application together. So hopefully that answers that question. Another one, are there any noticeable increases in guest workloads based on enabling service discovery for a vCenter server? Nothing that I'm aware of. I have seen where if you have a lot of in service discovery itself, if we go here, let's go back to where we were. If you have a lot of service monitoring on, you can sometimes get a, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't want to say a false positive, but you can sometimes get a notification that the service is down. But this is only in really large environments where there's a lot going on, because when you enable this, it's more of a 5-minute poll versus a 24-hour poll. So, in a smaller environment, it's not something I would even consider. But in a larger environment, you may have, it's another polling, hitting your vCenter. So there could be a little bit of a potential performance hit, just something to look at as you're going into service discovery, and just something to keep an eye on. I haven't really seen it often, but it is just something to think about. All right, so there are a couple of more chats and Q&As out there, but we are rapidly running out of time. So if there's anything else that I've missed, I will go through everything carefully and follow up with any messages. Like I said, I'll send out a recording, send out the PowerPoint. Any questions you have, feel free to hit me up. If you want to go deeper into vRealize operations on service discovery, really any topic, happy to do so. Just let me know. Thanks a lot for taking some time out of your day, joining my webinar. Hopefully this was helpful to you, and hopefully we'll be back together again soon. We try to do this at least once a quarter. So thanks again. Have a good day, everybody. Take it easy.
Thanks, Tom. Thank you, everybody, for joining.